Good evening. Welcome to our presentation. Superintendent Dr. Lolli Haws is going to be bringing us a sample of what she's been talking about lately all around our community about raising our children in Racine. There's been a lot of changes going on in Racine Unified for many, many years, and of course the Unified Group's been together for about 40 years. Way before the Racine Unified started, the Racine Taxpayers Association started back in 1948. We'd love for you to become a member. It's only $25 a year. You can check us out at Twitter at Racine Taxpayers. You can check us out on Facebook at Racine Taxpayers. And we look forward to your support so we can continue to bring you events like this. But tonight our guest is Dr. Lolli Haws. She spent 9 years out on the East Coast working with children in inner cities in Virginia and Washington, D.C. And she's now celebrating her second year, starting her third year, helping to work with our children here in our community. With no further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Lolli Haws.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm coming here tonight for two things. I want to share with you. I want to share with you some of the work we've been doing in Racine on behalf of our children, because the main job that I have is to make sure our children do the best they can do, and that the children that all of our community sends to our schools get the best education possible, so that they can be productive citizens and contribute to the quality of the whole community. Secondly, I'm going to talk about some of the legislation that was passed this year and how it affects our finances here in Racine and how that will affect property taxes. So I can give you a little bit of information about that, and then we'll have a little bit of time hopefully for questions. I came to Racine in 2013, July, and I spent the first 3 months going everywhere in the community. I met with parents and teachers and in schools and in backyards and in living rooms and every groups like these all across the city. And I basically listened, and I asked people what they wanted from their public schools, what they were concerned about, what they were proud of, what were the best things, what were the things we needed to address. And after the first 100 days of doing that, put together a plan that we called Raising Racine. And that's a real intentional name. It means, of course, raising our children. It also means raising the quality of the education and raising the achievement in reading and math in particular for our children. And we also know that as the schools do better in a community, the community does better, because if people have confidence in the public school system, property values tend to be higher, people tend to be willing to move here, businesses look more favorably upon starting a business in a community where the schools are strong. So while we are raising our children and raising the scores, we're also raising the entire community. And of course, as the community more and more supports its public schools, the public schools will get better. So it's a interdependent relationship, and that title was selected very purposefully. So it's a 3-year plan. This is what I'm going to share with you as far as what we did in year 2, which was this past school year. We're in year 3 this year, and sometime probably February, March, I will come out with the Raising Racine 2.0 or whatever it's going to be called, to talk about the next 3 years and what we're going to work on. So I'll just summarize briefly for you. We had 3 priorities that we have done on everything. When we look at our budget, when we look at how we hire people and staff people, when we look at how we set the priorities for our work, what we want to pay attention to and not, are these 3 things. We look at student achievement as the main thing. First and foremost, everything we do has to focus on the children and their achievement in reading and math. Secondly, another priority that we hold very important, is closing the achievement gap. And what that means is that in general we have achievement here, and our white students and our students who are not in poverty have very strong achievement. The gaps that we have are in children who are living in poverty, children who are Hispanic, Black, or who have a disability. Those children do not do as well in reading and math, and so we call that an achievement gap. It's also a graduation rate that's lower for those groups. So we need to pay attention to what extra support those groups need so that they can do as well as everybody on the whole. The third priority, and we heard this a lot, I still hear this a lot, we need positive environments in our school. We need safe, positive school environments, a climate we call it, so that children can learn, teachers can feel good, everybody's safe and happy, and we address discipline and behavior problems so that a school is a good place to be. Last year, year 2, we had 3 things that we narrowed in on to get to those priorities. The first was continued to be achievement. We focused on kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, reading and math, 9th grade, and I'll explain that in a minute, and then graduation rates. Those were kind of some big areas. We also focused on ACT scores, making sure our students had good preparation for taking ACT, and a few other things, all of that under student achievement. Secondly, we focused on the referendum. A year ago now, we were out talking to everybody about the referendum, asking the community to support the referendum, and they did, as you know, and that was a big accomplishment for that referendum to pass as far as the district is concerned, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The third thing is that we know that just like any business, you get better through continuous improvement on looking at your data, looking at your evidence, seeing what's working, what's not, either fixing what's not working or getting rid of it and doing more of what is working but doing it better. But we can't do that if we don't have good data. So we knew we had some bad, not bad, but very weak systems in place. We didn't have good collection of data around student addresses and communicating with parents and keeping cumulative records and keeping grades and keeping track of whose attendance is and isn't right. So we purchased a new system called Infinite Campus that is in place now this year that is much better data. Parents can go online with their child's ID number. They can see their attendance, they can see their grades, they can send an email to their teacher, they can see if there was homework tonight, they can be constantly checking up on that. Teachers can look and see how children are doing in their reading scores and their math scores. It'll compile the report card for parents. All of that is in this Infinite Campus. So we are very excited to have something that addresses better data. So those are the big 3 things we worked on last year. Here's some things that the results that we got with our children. So PALS is a test that we give in kindergarten, 1st, and this past year for the first time 2nd grade. It tests, do you know your ABCs? Do you know the sounds of the ABCs? Do you have a few basic words that you can read? Can you tell what is a rhyming word and not a rhyming word? It's a basic reading skill set. Teachers give that to children one-on-one. They ask every child this set of questions in the fall so they know what they know and don't know, and then they work on those. And then in the spring they give it again. And you get a score that tells you if you're at benchmark. At benchmark means you're where you should be to go on to the next grade. I was shocked when I came to Racine. The first year I was here, the year before, we had started kindergarten. 25% of our kindergartners were not ready. And by the end of the year, 33% were not ready. It actually got worse as the year went along. I said, well, you can't have that, right? You can't have that. So we put something in place for teachers in kindergarten to do that worked on phonics and the alphabet and the sounds and all of that. It's called Foundations. So we went from that 33% is the opposite of the 67% of the kids who were where they needed to be in kindergarten at the end 2 years ago to this year. Now we have 86% of our kindergartners where they need to be when they walk into 1st grade. That is about 500 kids. So there are 500 more kids in 1st grade this year where they should be than we had just 2 years ago. So that's a big improvement. Same thing in grade 1. Now we've only done grade 1 for 2 years. We had 64% 2 years ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. And at the end of this year, we had 76% now walking into 2nd grade where they should be. So that is great. We know that if you can leave 1st grade reading where you should be, you will more than likely be fine. If you leave 1st grade not ready, not where you should be, you never really catch up. You're always a reader who's behind. It's very hard to catch children up once they get 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. So this is very promising for moving on through the system as these kids grow up, and I'll show you that next. This is a reading test we give to all of our kindergarten through 8th graders. And again, we give it in the fall, and we actually give it in the winter, and then we give it in the spring. And teachers look at it when they get that they're doing it right, and they'll start next week. And the reason they give it in the fall is because it says you're weak in vocabulary, you don't have very good comprehension, you read too slow, and you need to work on sounding words out. So now when I plan my teaching, I can't just teach one thing to all of you, can I? I have to have small groups, and I pull all my children who need vocabulary, and I pull my children, and I spend extra time on the things that you need. So those tests, some people say we give too many tests, but what the reason for those are is so that the teachers can really teach exactly what you need. So the blue here shows what the score on average was in the fall, and the red shows what the score was on average in the spring for each grade. So you can see, look at the kindergarten average score, how big a jump they made. In the first grade, I have this too, I should pass this out. I have these little charts on this handout. The green line is what the national average is. Millions of children take this same test all across the United States every fall, winter, spring. So the green line is the score that the average child gets across the whole United States. So what we are excited about, for the first time, you can see that our kindergarten and our first grade students are just slightly, with a 158 and a 177, just slightly above the national average in reading. So that's the first time really ever in a long, long time that Racine can say that. So what I want to point out is now those first graders at a 177, now they're in second grade, they're already stronger than last year's second graders who started the fall with a 168. So now our second graders are already stronger, so they, I believe, very easily will hit the green bar this year and the next year, and that's going to build on up through the system, and our students will get stronger and stronger. Does that make sense? Am I making sense? So this is the same chart now for math. So there's math, same thing, fall score in math, spring score in math across all the grades, and you can see that every grade had growth, was a much stronger score by the end, and again, especially in our younger grades. And what we want to hit in the near future is that green bar. We want to be at the national average, and in the far future, 5 years from now, we want to be above that. We can be, there's no reason we can't be. But our first oomph is to just get to the national average, right? So another measure that we pay close attention to is our graduation rate. This is 5 years of graduation rates, and you see up there it says 4-year cohort. That means I start as a freshman, and in 4 years I walk across the stage with a diploma. We have many children who take a 5th year, and a few, usually students with disabilities, who take a 6th year to graduate, but this is just the kids who started in our district as freshmen and graduated in 4 years. So the bar over here is the state, and you can see that the state over 5, and this is not for this June 15, we don't have that yet. The state takes a while to calculate all that. This is for June of 14, so it's a year ago this June, graduation. As a state, there's been a 3% increase in the graduation rate all across Wisconsin in 5 years. Racine has had an 11% increase in graduation in the last 5 years. And you can see that this June 13 to June 14, we had a 5% increase. We had the highest graduation rate increase of any district in the state of Wisconsin in June of 2014. So our teachers are doing something well. The good news, and I'll bet none of you would ever, if I said true, false, you would all say false. What do you think about our black student graduation rate? We've had a 21% increase in our black student graduation rate in 5 years. And if you look at the state, it was a 5% just in 2014. The state average is 65%. Racine Unified actually has a graduation rate for black students that's higher than the state average. So the same is very true for our Hispanic students, and that has gained 15% roughly in 5 years and has jumped just in that last, from 13 to 14, look, it went up 13% just in 1 year. So that is another big success for our Hispanic students. And some people would say, well, what about the white kids? You're paying all attention to all these kids, you're not helping our kids. Actually, our white student graduation rate has gone up by 6% as well. Some people ask what we did or what happened. I'll just tell you one thing, there are many things. It used to be that if I enrolled in algebra in my 9th grade year, and I took algebra and I was not very good at it, and I would take the whole class for a whole year, and in June I would get an F. And what would I have to do? Come back in the fall, what do I have to do now? I'm a sophomore, but what am I doing? I'm taking algebra for a whole another year, right? And what if I don't pass it again? Now I'm 16 years old, I need 3 math classes to graduate, and I haven't passed algebra yet for my freshman year. What would most students do who are in that pickle? They probably drop out, right? Now what we have is something called Odyssey-ware. So I'm a freshman, I'm taking algebra, and my teacher notices first quarter I'm already iffy on my algebra. What that student can do either after school or as part of a study hall is get on this computer program called Odyssey-ware, and they can take an algebra assessment, and it will show them you're strong here, you understand this part but you don't understand this part, and then it will give you practice and explanation and help in that piece. If I go the whole year and I fail algebra, and I went to Horror Lake this summer during summer school, and I saw about 40 students in the room doing English, science, social studies, and math on Odyssey where they had not passed one of their classes. So they take the assessment at the end of the course, they didn't pass it, and it says, you did polynomials, you did binomials, but you didn't do parabolic curves, or you didn't do one part of algebra. That's the part and this other part. Students can just study those pieces, then take the test and pass the whole class and get credit back. And they don't have to take the whole class all year all over again. So that accelerates kids to get their credits more quickly so that they don't fall so far behind that they throw up their hands and walk out the door and never come back. So that's one thing we've done. And you brought up how we compare with other districts. So we tend to look at ourselves compared to these districts because they're similar size and similar urban diverse districts like ours with a high poverty. So this is the blue is June of 13, and the red is June of 14. You can see that Green Bay actually dropped their graduation rate. Kenosha, very slight. Madison's a little bit. Milwaukee, flat. And then Racine Unified in that year had a big jump. And I've been telling everybody my personal goal is that we take Madison this year. When we get our results in the spring for the June 15 graduation, I believe we will be ahead of Madison. And then we'll take on Kenosha and all the rest of them later, the next year. One other thing we do in Racine that we started 2 years ago is called this freshman cohort. We know from research that students have a chance to take 8 credits in a freshman year and get 8 credits in their pocket, and they need 23 to graduate. So we know that if you end your freshman year and you have 6, you've passed science, social studies, math, PE, and band and English. You've got 6 credits. You are 4 times more likely to graduate. If I have 5 credits or 4 or 3, now I'm in trouble. And now how am I going to get all my sophomore classes plus the ones I need to catch up on? And it kind of becomes this tidal wave that you can't ever quite get past. So we are focused in our high schools on our freshmen, making sure they get 6 credits at least. They pass at least 6 of their classes by the end of the year. And what we've done is so let's take, we're close to Case here, let's take Case. Case has 500 freshmen. So we divided the freshmen into 3 groups, they're called cohorts. They all stay together. And they all have the same English, science, social studies, and math teacher. There's about 125 kids in that group, 130. And those teachers only teach those kids. It used to be you got your schedule and I'm with these kids in English, and I'm with a bunch of different kids in science, and I'm with different kids in history class, and so I'm all over the place. Now all those students know each other really well. We have a summer bridge in the fall for 2 weeks in August. They get to know each other, they get to know their teachers, they see their schedule, they learn where they go. They have the same assistant principal, they have the same counselor, and they have a person that we've hired called a freshman advocate. And that person is sort of like their mom at school, or dad, some of them are men. They say, you were late to class, you're missing your homework, I'm calling your mom because you've been tardy 3 days in a row, and where were you yesterday? And they are kind of following these kids around, and they're watching their attendance, they're watching their grades, they're calling their parents, they're actually going to their house and knocking on the door sometime and say, come on, you got to get to school. Those freshman advocates are really there, especially on those kids who are iffy. Most of our freshmen do fine. You know, most of our freshmen come to school and do their work. But those kids who are iffy or, you know, always a little shaky, those freshman advocates know who they are, and the counselors know who they are, and the assistant principal, and they really pay attention to keep those kids on track. And if they're starting to get a failing grade, they put them in that Odyssey wear and get caught up so they aren't failing their classes. So we have 9 freshman advocates. We have 3 teams of about 125, 130 students with their same teachers. So Case has 3 groups of freshmen like that, Horlick has 3 groups, and Park has 3 groups.
And that includes the whole freshman class.
And that's the whole freshman class. So that's all of our freshmen have that experience. So here's what happened. In 2012-13, we had 60% of our kids ended their freshman year with 6 credits. And guess what our graduation rate was about? 60%, right? So it's really true. If they have 6 credits, they're gonna graduate in 4 years. We started at Horlick that 2 years ago with that freshman cohort, and the other high school principals, we started saying, you know, you need to pay attention to your freshmen and getting them their 6 credits, and so they were paying attention, and we jumped a little bit. This past year was the first year we had freshman advocates, and we had that model in all of our 3 big high schools. And we are at 75% of our freshmen with their 6 credits. So our sophomores this year, and I looked it up, I did the math, that is 230, that difference between 60 and 75 is 230 more sophomores right now with 6 credits than we had just 2 years ago. So you can see what our graduation rate will be in 3 years when those sophomores now who were in the freshman cohort last year, when they graduate, our graduation rates will be through the roof because these kids are all on track. So that's another piece that we're doing to push up the graduation rate and to make sure our freshmen understand that freshman year isn't the year to squirrel around and have a woohoo time in high school. You got to get 6 credits or you can't graduate. So those are just a couple of the examples of the kinds of things we're doing in Racine right now and some of the good news we've got. Those charts that you have there are condensed versions of exactly this. So that's the student achievement. Remember I said we had 3 goals. Student achievement, the second one was the referendum. The referendum passed. And we are right now, 2 weeks ago we had groundbreaking. We are building a new school at Knapp. Knapp is being built as a community school. We are working with the United Way of Racine County. They are investing a lot of money and time with us. A community school means that we know that Knapp is a high poverty school. It's in a very depressed area of the city. Lots of poverty, lots of joblessness there. So a community school is built to be more than just 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock school. It is also open in the evenings, it's open on the weekends. The building design has extra meeting rooms, has a little bit larger gym than we might usually put into an elementary school. That field is going to be probably a soccer field or something like that. And then United Way is funding a person whose job will be to plan activities after school and on weekends for parents. There could be parent classes, there can be English classes, GED classes. We have a little bit of a clinic room. We made a larger clinic than usual. We can have a dentist come by once a month. We can have a nurse practitioner come by and give parents prescriptions rather than parents having to try to get up and get a car and get over to their doctor and get the prescription and come back. We're working with the police department. We might have something to do with maybe a cop house there, something like that. It's going to be a community center more than just a school, and at 4 o'clock they lock the doors and everybody goes home. It's going to be open. We'll have basketball tournaments, soccer, things for kids to do, evenings and weekends. We might end up serving supper, I don't know, a food pantry, some things like that. Those are all ideas right now, exactly what they're planning that right now with NAP and with United Way. But that's a community school model, and I think it will be very good for that community. They'll have a real anchor of a community center and a school in one place. That is a big movement right now across the United States to have community schools. I went to San Diego last year and I visited 5 different community schools in San Diego, extremely successful because the children have a place to go in the evenings and on the weekends, and the parents have a place to meet. And some services that some parents don't always have cars or bus transportation or ways to get there. They got to take all their kids with them just to go to the doctor, where if they can stop by the school just down the street and get that can be a good service for them. There are many of them in New York City. United Way across the United States is funding community schools all over the place. Cincinnati, Cleveland have many. New York, like I said, California has many, many, many. So we are excited to be one of the first community schools in Wisconsin. Our enrollment at NAP is already up because parents are saying, whoa, I want to get there now so that I can be part of that new school. We have a fabulous principal there. Her name is Tangela King. She is the most effervescent principal you ever want to meet, and so she's attracting a lot of families and fun, and she is a strict disciplinarian, and those kids are behaving over there at NAP, and they're seeing this. The school is getting transformed right as we speak. This is what the building will look like from the street. Won't that be pretty in that part of the city to have a nice, new, beautiful building like that? The other one that we're building is Olympia Brown. Olympia Brown, if you go up Charles, it's in Caledonia, you go up Charles Street and turn left on 5.5 Mile Road, there's a field. If you go there now, you'll see them working. There's a big kind of farm field there that is owned by the district, and we're building a new school there. And the thing about this school, we know we want to be cautious with our money. We know that that's a part of the community that's going to grow. There's going to be more and more subdivisions, more and more homes, mostly young families. So you see how this school has got a hallway and then a wing and then a hallway and then a wing. We've built it to hold what we believe will be the number of students by next fall in the next few years. But as the school as the community grows, we can add another hall and a wing and a hall and a wing, and we don't have to build a whole new school. We can just add on to that school to make it large enough to serve the community, and that will down the road be I think a really smart way to go. In 20 years, there's going to be a lot more homes there, and rather than build a whole new school building, we can add on this way, and it's designed to be able to do that. And it will look like this. And that school is going to be a science-focused school. They're going to build all of their reading, writing, math, studies, and work around science. And then the third one that we're building is Gifford. Gifford was originally built, the building that's there now was built to be a middle school, and some of you may have been here long enough to remember that. Gifford was built to be a middle school, and then we've converted it to an elementary. So it's got a lot of classrooms that used to be the old home ec room or used to be the old industrial arts room. They've turned that into an elementary classroom, so it's huge. It's way bigger than it needs to be, and it should be back to a middle school. So what we're going to do is take the building that is Gifford, that used to be a middle school, and we're going to convert that back to a middle school. So we'll put, that is where the middle school grades would be, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then around the front, as you're going on Northwestern Avenue, if you go past Gifford, the front and the side is a 2-story addition that will be all of the elementary classrooms. So Gifford will be a K through 8 school. If you start Gifford in kindergarten, you can stay there all the way through 8th grade and then go to Case. So that is what the people out that part of Caledonia wanted. They wanted a more local neighborhood middle school, and that's what we're building out there. We lose many families from that area to Oak Creek. Every child whose parents open enroll out to another district, if they open enroll to Oak Creek or Burlington or wherever they go, we send a check to that district for $6,700. That's our tax dollars going to another district. So we want to build out there in a way that keeps those children here so the tax dollars stay here with them. We are seeing already this year our open enrollment every year has steadily increased. This year it's down. And it's down mostly from the Caledonia area. Families in Gifford were tending to, in 4th or 5th grade, go to Oak Creek. This year families in Gifford stayed at Gifford because they want to be part of this middle school. So that is all good for us, because the more students we have, of course, the more state aid we get, and the dollars that we collect in taxes stay here in the community. So Gifford will look like that. That's the front and the side on the east and on the road there on Northwestern Avenue, and that's a 2-story elementary school addition. So that would be a huge school. That's going to be 1,200, 1,500 students, be a very big school. All right, the next little topic, and then I'll be done. You can ask some questions. What's happened in funding for the state in education? I know you're all informed people. You'll keep informed on taxpayers and tax issues. So the original proposal in the state for education was to cut funding back. And there was a lot of outcry saying, how can you possibly do that? Our healthcare costs go up, our gasoline costs, our electric costs, our heat costs, our teacher salaries, all those costs are going up. If you cut back, we can't do that. So actually the legislature restored, the funding was here, they were going to cut it, and they actually brought it back to where it was. So it's not increased, it's just the same as it was last year.
Dr. Haws, just real quick, what year are you talking about when you just gave your little description? Is that this year? Or
For this coming year now. Whatever it was, the funding was last year is frozen for this year. So the amount of money that we're getting is the same funding that we had a year ago, even though our costs are going up. So that's put a real squeeze on the budget for us.
Okay.
The state also has tended to, so we have a fund of money that comes from the state for the school district, and the state also sends money not to the school district but to the community, so to Mount Pleasant, to Caledonia, to Racine, to that taxing entity to keep property taxes low, to offset property taxes. And they've tended to always increase that a little bit too, so that our property taxes don't fluctuate. They did not do that this year. They have frozen that as well. So any aid that comes to offset property tax increases at the local level is frozen for this year as well. And then the categorical aid. Categorical aid means aid for special education students with disabilities, additional money because they have higher costs for children who are English language learners who don't speak English and need teachers to teach them English, money for transportation, different categories of funds. You probably know some other categories. Different categories of funds. The state has usually increased that slightly every year, recognizing that our costs go up too. So that also had no increase. So all of the funds that the state has tended to kind of follow inflation to keep up with this year are frozen in the 15-16 budget to the same amount that they were last year. This is a big one, and you'll see it on that chart. I don't know if you have that chart. I'll show you a chart in just a second. In the 1970s, this legislature passed a law that said any district that was willing to invest in desegregation would receive some money, not extra money, but money to lower property taxes. So it was a property tax benefit to the communities that would do that, and Racine did that in the 70s. And we get $8.5 million a year every year. I think I'm right on that. Oh, I always get the numbers mixed up. I think it's $8.5 million a year, or maybe it's 11 million.
Busing desegregation fund?
Well, people think of it as busing. It was just a property tax relief if you were moving kids so that your schools were diverse. And we did that. That's why we have Jefferson Lighthouse. That's why we have Red Apple. Those are magnet schools. We actually transport children from this part of this county into Jefferson Lighthouse, Red Apple, Bull Fine Arts, usually white children going into Racine. We have children coming from central Racine to Westridge, to Goodland, to SC Johnson. So children from the central city coming out to the west, so that kind of balances out. It doesn't make it all equal by any means, but it does make all of our schools relatively diverse. And the Racine taxpayers have always had a significant tax benefit to that of about 11 cents on your tax bill reduced for doing that. Originally, the proposal in the legislature was to eliminate that all this year, which would have meant your taxes would have gone up. No, sorry, I am getting my numbers mixed up. Your taxes would have gone up 85 cents if they had eliminated that all at once. That would be, yes, per thousand. So $850 more on a $100,000 house, which would have been an enormous increase. So myself and Mr. Hazen and Mark Duff went and talked with the DPI, the Department of Instruction, and we met with Speaker Voss and Weatherston and all of Wangard, all those folks, and we said, if you do this, that's an 85-cent tax increase in Racine just to eliminate that bill. So they are still eliminating it, but they are phasing it out over 8 years. So in 8 years, your taxes will be 85 cents higher. But they're phasing it out to $1.1 million a year. So it's 11 cents more every year for the next 8 years. You're going to see your property taxes go up because they are phasing out this 220. It's called the 220 aid. And that's the aid. We receive it. Some of the communities on the outside edge of Milwaukee receive it. A few other places around the state have been receiving that aid for many, many years. And it's gone, it's phased out over 8 years now. And then the final thing is voucher funding. In the past, until this coming year now, the state has this much money for education, and they took this slice out to pay voucher payments for students attending private schools. And then the rest of the money they distributed to school districts. Now, the state is not funding vouchers. Now there's this pool of money, and it's frozen. Remember, I said it's frozen. And the voucher costs are on the districts and on the local taxpayer entities. So your local taxes are paying the vouchers rather than your state taxes. So in essence, what the state has done is put those funding mechanisms that the state used to take care of are now at the local level. I think I can show you this on this slide, and you have this on the second page. And I just want to talk you through this because Racine is different than the rest of the state. Do you all know what vouchers are, right? So there's two pictures of the Wisconsin. The one with the red star, of course, that's Racine. And the other one is the rest of the state except Milwaukee. So in Racine Unified, I qualify for a voucher if I am at 300% of poverty. So that, for a family of 4, is $72,696. If I make that or less, for my husband, wife, and 2 kids, family of 4, I qualify for a voucher. The rest of the state is 185% of poverty, or $44,828. The original thinking, I think, for this the state to support vouchers was to assure that all families and low-income families had access to private schools as well. But they've differentiated for Racine and Milwaukee to say 300% of poverty is eligible, and the rest of the state it's 185. In Racine, there is no limit to how many families can get vouchers. In the rest of the state, except Milwaukee, there is a limit of 2% of your enrollment. So in Racine, if it was 2% of our enrollment, we would have 400 kids eligible. But we have about 1,200 we're projecting. I think that's right, taking vouchers. In every other district, they know how much they have to budget for because they have a limit of 2% of their enrollment. So then they can do the math and set aside in their budget. We have to wait. We're waiting now until next week Friday for third Friday count, and then the private schools will have to send us the lists of all the children in their schools who are on vouchers so that we know how much money we have to pay. So this shows you what's happened to our taxes. We promised with the referendum that our taxes would be relatively flat, all things being equal. What happened is that all things didn't turn out to be equal because the state froze their funding and vouchers became funded at the local level rather than through the state. So in 2013-14, the tax rate was $9.96. This past year, with the referendum passing, it was $9.56. And right now, we're projecting somewhere around $9.59, $9.60, $9.61. We have to wait until we get our third Friday count enrollment and know exactly what our state aid will be. But our taxes are going to be relatively flat, but they are going to go up. You can see that the 85 cents is the community service levy. That's for our after-school programs. In the 14-15 year, we just ate that. We just absorbed that. We didn't levy that tax. We are levying it this year because we have to use that money to pay those voucher costs that we didn't have before. So the internal voucher cost, that's about $850,000. We're projecting $1.3 million maybe for vouchers that are our own costs. So that will help with that. So that's a levy that we didn't do last year. We did do it the year before, and we're doing it again this year. On top of that, that's at 11 cents for that 220 aid that every year they're going to phase out over 8 years. So that will be a tax increase because the legislature is phasing out that aid for desegregation. So that's how your taxes stack up. So our own Racine Unified tax is relatively flat, but you're going to see a total there of probably $10, $9.99. We're trying to stay in the nines. So as a total tax bill, your taxes are going to go up about 40 cents. So when you get your tax bill, you can say, yes, Racine is raising taxes, but you can also say that literally the district's taxes are relatively flat. On top of that is the 11 cents is not money that we're actually getting or not getting. That was a property tax relief that is gone away, right? And the 20 cents additional is for the vouchers for the children who've never been in Racine, who are going either into kindergarten or 6th grade or 9th grade at one of our private schools.
I guess my first question with regards to that last bar there, which of those is going to appear on the Racine Unified School District tax in our tax bill? I presume one of them, the community one with the desegregation, that's going to appear, I guess, on the state. It's going to show part of the state tax.
No, it'll show all of it. It will look like it's ours.
It all does look like it.
It looks like ours, but my point is isn't necessarily that we're getting more money. You know, it's that 11 cents was money that we received to offset taxes. Now we're not receiving that money, and so we won't offset the taxes. Does that make sense?
I understand that. I got
So
questions on them specifically, but I'm going to let some other people.
So the 11 cents and the 20 cents are both costs that don't end up funneling into the district in any way.
So we're going to see a big, huge
but you'll see it.
increase
You'll see your taxes go up.
The Unified School Tax. You keep calling it a voucher tax. Well, theoretically, you've got one less student for every voucher, so your costs should actually go down. So when you leave your costs the same, I think we're totally justified in saying that is an increase.
Our costs don't go down for the children who've never been in our district.
I'm talking about any student that you have that leaves a district or whatever. If they leave to go into a voucher school, that's one less student that you have to teach. That's
Right.
one less student. That's one less expense.
So if I have across a whole district as big as ours, if 400 kids go away, let's say, let's just say 400 kids leave. That's 1 student in this class, 2 in that class, 5 in that school, 3 at that high school, 8 over here. It doesn't actually ever calculate into, hardly ever calculate into 1 less teacher, or 400 students. You might say, well, that's 20 teachers. You know, you should have 20 teachers less, but it doesn't always work that way, because now I might have had 27. Now I've got 25 kids, but I still have to teach. So it actually increases our costs in some ways, because we have fewer students for 1 teacher until it gets low enough that we can, you know, not hire a teacher.
And that's fine. We've heard that argument many times. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when enrollment was actually increasing, you know, when that 1 student per class was increasing, it meant more teachers, more staff to take care of the additional students. When it goes the other way, all of a sudden, it doesn't mean less teachers, less staff. In fact, you've just said it could mean more expenses because you're losing a student. Well, that's what it sounds like you just said.
Well, on the whole, the calculation might show that, but we would not hire more teachers if enrollment was going down. That's not true, but we might not be able to reduce teachers by as much as it would seem based on a number of kids, you know.
But you understand our problem when it was going the other way. Those 400 students didn't say, well, it's only 1 student per class, we don't need another teacher. No, it was immediate, more people, more staff.
Fixed costs are not going to go up.
Right.
Because of that enrollment. They'll be adding 2 kids here, 2 years.
Exactly.
So you won't be adding a teaching force.
We've hired right now, I think, 3 extra teachers, and we're at about 350 more kids than we thought. So the reverse is true. Most of those kids were just absorbed into classrooms everywhere that already existed. We had a couple schools where all of a sudden they had way more kindergartners. Gifford had another more kindergarten class than we thought, for example. So we've hired, I believe, 3 teachers more, and we're for about 300 more kids than we thought we'd have. So the reverse is true too.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I was saying 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
When you figured your enrollments, you would still be collecting local taxes for some of those kids.
I'm not sure
based on the rolling average.
if we were increasing or
When we were losing students, you were losing the
right, and
state
that's
aid.
that lag
You
that
were losing the state aid, but you were able to levy taxes on those students for 3 years.
I
because
see
of
what
the
you're saying.
rolling average. So it was taxpayers lost.
That's a question you have to ask Mark Duff more than me. I see what you're saying. I'm not sure that that's true. You may be right. I don't know. We projected 19,400 students this year, and that's what we built our budget on. And today's number is 19,920, I think. Now, we know there's a few more, like we're just cleaning up everything, kids who've moved away, that we thought were coming back, that the schools have to report to us, oh, he never came back, and we have to look, did he go to another school here, or did he leave the city? Parents always tell us when they move in, but they don't always tell us when they move out. So it takes a couple weeks, but right now we're 400 more students than we projected, and we've hired 3 that I know of additional teachers right now. So, I mean, I think that's pretty good. We're absorbing those students into classes that already exist.
I want to congratulate you and your staff for avoiding the $7 million tax increase that you talked about. What, July or August? You know,
we were looking, yes, in July, we thought this would be 1036. So we've gone for this bar in July. If you'd have seen my presentation out at Wingspread, we were projecting 1036, and we have cut and cut. And don't let the teachers union tell us you're going to hear this probably next week. Oh, they got plenty of money. They're not giving us a raise. They got plenty of money. We went from 1036 projected tax next year, and we're at 999 right now. So we have cut and cut and cut. And now we are actually, Mark Duff is getting a little bit of an ulcer because he's not sure that we've got the money that we're going to be able to cover everything.
Well, you promised you'd have it. That was part of your referendum promise.
Right. What has changed, though, is that the state froze everything instead of increasing. We said we promised it would be flat if all things stayed the same. Well, we weren't anticipating a 0% increase, and we were not anticipating the vouchers to be added on like this.
I was going to say also, when are you going to set up a committee to dole out punishment for walking board members?
I work for the board, they don't work for me. I can't do much to that. The other thing to point out is that the school levy, there will be a tax credit of 22 cents. That, again, that's the state tax levy credit. So we don't get that money. That is applied to your tax bills. And that's what that amount is this year. That varies a little bit every year. So this just shows us where we are compared to other districts around us again. The red on the left is where we were last year. The red on the right is where we think we're going to come in this year in October. And the state average, and then all the districts, Kenosha, Burlington, Muskego, Milwaukee, Madison, Oak Creek, and the state of Wisconsin. So while I know all of you want us to hold the line on taxes, we want you also to see that compared to other districts, we are relatively low. And this is what these other districts, we don't know what they're doing this year. Some of these districts, Kenosha passed a referendum, Madison, Oak Creek, so theirs are going to go up as well. So the blue ones are all last year, and we don't know what they'll be for this year. So our $9.99 is compared to the last year. So we are not taxing, at the highest level as many other districts. All right. So basically, the first year in Raising Racine that I was here, we created some momentum. We got some things going. This past year, you saw our achievement, the referendum, you see what we're working on, and we have accelerated that, and you see those big bumps going up. And what I believe will happen this year, we've had a great opening. Our teachers are very positive, very excited, and I believe we are going to exceed expectations, and you will be a group of people who feel like your money is well spent on getting quality education for the children who live in this community. So thank you very much. Now I can answer any questions.
This is our first attempt at doing a roundtable after our presentations, and I'm really excited about this first one, George. And Jane Nikolai has joined me as well. She's the Racine County Treasurer. She's the one that actually writes those bills, so you can blame her if you don't like anything she has to say tonight.
Well, I was really impressed. I did not dream we were going to get this out of Lolli Haws tonight. So right out of the chute, she was using a word that I hadn't heard
What?
in 40 years.
What word?
It was the word phonics.
Phonics?
And she said it twice.
Oh my gosh.
And I had to ask, do you realize, I haven't heard that word in a long, long time, and who brought it around? Now, I'm still not sure if I believe her on this.
Well,
that
the
one
numbers
person
right
actually
here
brought
show,
it in is
George.
going to change. You realize what a dramatic change this could make in our kids' reading
She showed us
abilities?
right there on those charts. It went from kindergarten, first and second grade. They've been doing it, and that's where they're starting to use those phonics, George, and that's making all the difference in the world.
And those first two grades are right up to that curve of the national average, and all the others are. I mean, you can.
George, I've lived here for
There
25
seems
years.
like
I've
hope.
never been excited about Racine Unified Schools until now. I saw this presentation a couple of months ago by Dr. Haws, and it was before even this latest bit of information came in, and I was already starting to see it. She's showing in the minority students the changes. What do you think about this, Jane?
The minority students, the white students, all the students, the achievement is up, and that's what schools are here for, is to educate our students.
Another thing I think is
Achievement
going to help
what's
those minority
important.
students might, and that they'll have an advantage over the voucher schools, and that's this community school.
Oh.
I think that is brilliant. Where it's open, could be open all night, have dinner there.
Right, but my hope is that community school, the students that attend that school are in that neighborhood. They're not like our magnet
That would
schools where they're
definitely be
busing them in
Yes,
from all
yes.
over the community.
Crisscrossing, they're passing each other on the road.
For it to work, it's
Yeah.
got to be the neighborhood students.
Well, and she talked about that increase in taxes because they were no longer going to get state aid for desegregation. Well, great. Now maybe we got it. That was one of the reasons they didn't want neighborhood schools, because they would lose that state aid if they quit busing kids.
You know,
well,
George
now
and I-
they're losing it anyway, so now let's cut down on the cost
George,
of busing.
you and I, for 10 years since I met you, have been talking about community centers around the community,
Yeah.
and how, you know, they're empty half the time, they're not being utilized properly. They have this school that they're building in the central city, kind of on the west side, and it's going to be a community center and a school. We're going to be able to actually
I think that's really
potentially
good.
replace all of our community centers with community center-based schools,
as she
which
was-
could save the taxpayers of the
Well,
city money as well.
Actually not.
Why?
Because the community centers, the community programs that the school puts on is Fund 80, which is in addition to the tax levy. That's an additional tax levy.
Huh?
Yeah, she's getting all treasurer on
Come on, Madam Treasurer, what
So
are you talking
that's
about
not
here now?
under revenue limits or any of
Okay.
that fun stuff. That is in addition to that. And she showed that on her little chart, where part of that tax levy, that little increase, was because of the community programs. So that
Okay.
is going to cost the taxpayers money. I think it's good money because it helps the community.
Oh, the community
but
schools.
we're paying for it. It's not free.
Okay. Well,
All right,
also,
all right.
but she also mentioned that United Way is going to be coming in with programs.
Right,
And they've done this around the
exactly.
country. Perhaps other
And
volunteer
that's not
and charitable
covered by the
groups.
tax levy, I mean, the
That's,
tax.
that's an
The
additional
additional
tax
money
levy.
coming in.
And-
But
and
the
it's
United
not-
Way
it's not
money is
covered
not.
by the
That's donation.
Revenue limits.
by the
It's
revenue limit?
outside revenue limits.
Okay.
Oh, wow,
very
that's
good.
not, I don't like that. That's not too cool. But still, I pictured myself as a kid under that type of situation. Now, we didn't need that too much. I mean, after school, we were still out, on the playgrounds, riding our bikes and
Right.
that type of stuff. But that goes back a long, long ways, longer than I care to say.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that it could be very, very valuable in just getting kids out there instead of going in and getting into drugs and getting into their video games and this type of stuff, to actually soccer fields right out back, ball fields right out back.
You know, George, if
basketball
there was
courts right
access
there.
to some cute computers that they could use after school hours, like a lot of kids are going down to the public library, if they would have those in those local community schools where they could use those up until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, that would be those resources and the time for the parents. I mean, just think the parents don't have to drive their kid downtown to the public library, and then they got to go get their groceries, and they got to go to Kohl's, and they got to do all the other things that they have to do. They can have it right there in their neighborhood community
Yeah, I
center,
think
that's great.
especially if we can keep these neighborhoods.
Right.
One of the things I've seen is I've warned the voucher school people. This is voucher schools had the phonics. They had all this pinpoint correction of courses. You don't do the whole course over again. Just address the parts you're having trouble with. But this community center is going to be a little hard for a voucher school to emulate.
That is so true.
So this is one place where maybe the government school will be able to do something that the voucher schools can't. We shall see. And a lot of it's going to be
Right.
how they handle the cost.
Oh, and how
too.
much it costs.
Yeah.
You know,
because it's gonna-
one other thing I got to put in here, George. Act 10 and the voucher schools for the city of Racine, or the Racine Unified District, were supposed to create a hole in the budget. It was supposed to create a loss of students in the public school system. It hasn't. We thought the numbers would go down and the good kids would go to the private schools, and the bad kids would be left in the public schools. And we said that was not going to happen, and in fact, we're showing that that does not happen. Our schools are actually getting better, the numbers are better, the performance is better, and it's because these teachers in the education system has a competition.
Well, that could be it. That could be the competition, or it could be because of Act 10, and the teachers could no longer hold the line on the old ways anymore. Now they had to go along with a Dr. Haws that comes in and says, you will teach phonics. You will do this Odyssey thing where they only study the parts of the math that they missed instead of doing the whole course all over again. I mean,
Well, and that
where
whole-
has that been?
Where they have that freshman advocate, you're reaching
Oh, is
the
that
students
brilliant?
right away.
It takes that
First
great
year
big
in
school,
high
makes it
school,
smaller
there's
schools.
somebody
On
helping.
that note, Jane Nikolai, that is an excellent point. George Meyers, Jane Nikolai, I'm Ken Brown for Racine Taxpayers Association. I'd just like to take a few moments to thank a couple of people real quick. First of all, Angry Brothers Pub out here on the west side of Racine. Great place. They took very good care of us.
Good area.
Great acoustics, a little bowling alley action in the background. I've got to thank Gary once again for being with us for AVA Media, who's going to make this presentation look good on TV so y'all can watch it on YouTube and
count on
and
Jane,
on
too,
Car
to help 'em
25. And Jane's going to help with that too. Don't forget to check us out on Car 25. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Racine Taxpayers Association, on Twitter, and also right on the internet as Racine Taxpayers. Thank you again for listening,
Thanks for watching.
and thanks for watching.
Good night.